Live everywhere on netrootsradio.com. David Waldman, Kagro, in the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Friday, and that means something. I don't know. In radio world, that's supposed to be like a big party, whatever. Hey, it's Friday. I gotta get some noisemakers down here. We'll celebrate Friday, May 26th. Not just any Friday. May 26th, 2023. Time for another show. Lots happening. I don't know. Actually, seems like a pretty busy news Friday. I mean, I have a ton of stories that I've been waiting to share, and, you know, I told everybody to stop making news, and it didn't work. It did the opposite. I don't know. I'll see if I can work this out and try some reverse psychology on the world for perhaps next Friday. But big holiday weekend coming, and we won't be on the air to discuss it on Monday. And I don't know what's going to happen. We better get started, I guess. I got to tell you, like, really, you could do the whole show today. Well, you could probably do the whole show the whole time. And maybe this was even the original intent back in the days when it was Daily Coast Radio. You could fill the whole show reading what's on the front page over at Daily Coast, the stories that are listed there, the diaries that have been put up there. It's a great, that's what the place is for, but I don't know, not all the time have I ever said, every single thing that's there right now could actually be read and be a fascinating story. Sometimes, there's a little esoterica, there's some insidery stuff, there's stuff I feel like we've discussed already, but today, I don't know, it sparkles. That's not what we're going to do. I don't think it's what we're going to do, because there's so many other things to do. And, I don't know, man. I guess I better get started. I have to start with where we left off. I don't have to, but I'm going to start where we left off yesterday. Yesterday, I mentioned to you, I had to get it on the record, Ken Paxton, Attorney General of Texas, actually in trouble for his corruption. And I couldn't believe it. And it wasn't just the newspapers have reported his horrible corruption, because that's been going on for a long time. It was Republicans in the state legislature who can actually hold him to account have said we've had enough of his corruption, which is actually, a major story. That's incredible. It's one of the few times where Republicans anywhere have gone on the record saying, yeah, this is too much for us, even though it comes from a Republican, which is kind of incredible. And, it really literally is so incredible that when I mentioned it here at Kagro in the Morning World headquarters and discussed it with the staff, there were questions. What else did he do? What's really motivating these Republicans in the Texas state legislature to do this? Do they just want him out of the way as a potential rival for governor of Texas? Have any of them been abused at his hands so that they would be taken out of the way as potential rivals for governor or for whatever? Governors of Texas tend to, have their eyes on the presidency as well. It's just, I don't know. And I've been curious about how long this could go on with Ken Paxton for a long time. But, he tends to gain our notice here either from the ridiculous things, the really low down ridiculous things, like the time that he was caught on video at the courthouse stealing a, Mont Blanc type high end fountain pen from another lawyer at the courtroom, to, his political activity, filing every lawsuit that, the Federalist Society can come up for him to file in Texas to sue the Biden administration and everybody else under the sun, and just, and send them to the judge, what's his name? Kaczmarek and, Amarillo. Anyway, but on top of all that, apparently a laundry list of felonies, including bribery, that the legislature just won't put up with anymore. So that's actually quite a startling story. And I thought perhaps we ought to start with that one today. Except what happened? Oh, yes, that's right. I opened up Mastodon this morning and saw it and didn't. I don't know. I thought I had sent it to myself. Now I have to go and look for it in order to bring you the story that I thought was so exciting for some reason. I don't know. I guess I hit the wrong button and I left it up on my screen. I don't know if I'm going to be able to find the damn thing that I wanted now. This is very disappointing, but I'm sure I could find it pretty quickly. You know what? As a matter of fact, I can probably find it for you from the front page of Daily Kos, unless they just covered it yesterday, which might actually be the case. That might be the one thing that's not on their front page in the morning. But here is a trending story from among the diaries that we can grab from here. D-Row has this story. Texas House Committee votes to impeach Ken Paxton. That was the exciting development from overnight. And we'll see if they have links to, here's a nice gift link to the Houston Chronicle. Thank you, D-Row, for passing that gift link on to us. It begins, though, with the tweet of John Cooper reporting that Greg Abbott's Attorney General Ken Paxton was just recommended for impeachment by the Texas House Committee on General Investigating. That is, that's a Texan name for a committee for. What's this? The committee? It's Committee on General Investigating. Okay. Well, let's get to it. More details below soon on why it's important this corrupt Texas Republican falls. Not only could it spell doom for Abbott, but also, show more. Well, okay. You could show more, or you could show the Houston Chronicle's take on this, and why not get the local opinion? Thanks again to D-Row for providing that. Impeach Ken Paxton. It begins. Wait a minute. Do I have to, are you kidding me? This is to access this paywall-free article. Please enter your email address below. All right. Well, I'll do it, even though I object on principle. I don't know. All right. Well, hold on a second. That's not much of a gift, but it's not your fault, D-Row. It's Houston Chronicles. I don't know, and I think I should be reading the Houston Chronicle on this question, don't you? Impeach Ken Paxton. Full Texas House must stop Attorney General's corruption. That's the editorial from the Houston Chronicle. By the way, the pop-up ads that come with logging into the Houston Chronicle, clicking through to the Houston Chronicle, have to do with, so far, guns and bras. So, I don't know. You tell me what's going on. It's although the bra one is that Temu, I think, Chinese junk items site. Anyway, here's the news from the Houston Chronicle. Attorney General Ken Paxton needn't worry about whether or not the House Speaker was wielding his gavel tipsy the other night, as Paxton claimed in a desperate attempt to distract us from the real news about to break. I missed that one. Now, after Wednesday's jaw-dropping hearing, and there are some links, and maybe they'll let us read that article too. I wonder if we go from a gift article. Probably not. Maybe I can see if I can pocket that one and read it. Anyway, the editorial continues. Wednesday's jaw-dropping hearing before the House General Investigating Committee. It's Paxton who might be in need of a stiff drink, and it's Paxton's fellow Republican leaders who need to shake free of partisan influence and sober up to where the facts are leading. A criminal indictment of the Texas Attorney General. Yes, another one. And an impeachment. And we may finally be witnessing the first glimmers of accountability for Paxton. This being Texas, we won't bet on it. Paxton is still a high-profile, Trump-anointed Republican in a Republican-controlled state, but who among us, observing the charmed life led by this scoundrel masquerading as the state's top law enforcement officer, would have thought we'd even get as close to justice as one House committee did this week? The latest news... Oh, I'm sorry, this is one of their promos of another article they won't let us read. Texas lawmakers recommend impeachment of Ken Paxton. On Wednesday, intrigue gave way to damning allegations of corruption and lawbreaking as a panel of veteran prosecutors testified to the results of a previously secret Republican-led investigation into Paxton's scandalous tenure in the Attorney General's office. Alarming is how Republican Chairman Andrew Murr described the comprehensive list of concerns outlined in the hearing. It curls my mustache, he said. That's... Okay. That's one way of putting it. All right. The remarkable airing of evidence sharpened our understanding of Paxton's wrongdoing, and I'll go to another article to run that down, I guess, but this is an interesting place to start. Investigators told lawmakers they've substantiated claims that Paxton committed multiple crimes, including felonies, in attempts to shroud his extramarital affair and to help Nate Paul, an Austin real estate developer who had showered him with money and favors. In another shocking development Thursday, the House committee voted unanimously to take the exceedingly rare step of recommending the full House impeach Paxton. Support for such an action isn't clear, but with only a few days of the legislative session left, the House could take up the matter on Friday, that's today, and if approved, the Senate could hold a trial to determine whether Paxton should be removed. Paxton has been reelected twice despite, and this is why it's so hard to believe that there could be accountability, despite an 8-year-old indictment for felony securities fraud hovering over him. I mean, the entirety of his term in office, he's been credibly suspected of some serious felonies. But he denies any wrongdoing and is fond of blaming unfriendly allegations on liberals and heathens opposed to the conservative cause. Indeed, he dismissed Wednesday's House hearing as, quote, false testimony of highly partisan Democrat lawyers. Really? Even the one who worked as a federal prosecutor for former U.S. Attorney Ryan Patrick, a President Donald Trump appointee, and son of arch-conservative Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick? Okay, that makes it tough. But that helps, actually probably helps feed his story. Well, yeah, Dan Patrick will be my biggest rival for taking over the governorship here in Texas. So, of course, I mean, that might really be true. Dan Patrick's son is out to get Ken Paxton, but he's just so eminently gettable. You know, that's your fault, Ken. Paxton denounced Thursday's impeachment recommendation as the act of a corrupt political establishment and an illegitimate attempt to overthrow the will of the people and disenfranchise the voters of our state. He should know a little something about the latter, having filed a baseless lawsuit to throw out millions of lawfully cast ballots in 4 battleground states, not Texas, in a futile attempt to help Donald Trump overturn the 2020 presidential election. And what about all the evidence supplied by former Republican aides to Paxton who became whistleblowers? Paxton is under FBI investigation in connection with claims of those whistleblowers that he abused his office to benefit Paul. Paxton reached a tentative $3.3 million settlement with fired whistleblowers and then tried to stick Texas taxpayers with the bill. Lawmakers, wisely, have declined to pay. It's bad enough that we're stuck paying $40 million on outside counsel because apparently Paxton's antics have gutted senior staff at the AG's office. At times, during the dramatic hours-long hearing on Wednesday, the committee of 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats seemed incredulous as they listened to white-collar crime and public integrity veterans detail evidence, often interrupting to make sure they heard right. Did you just state, I want to be very clear? I don't know how Texan their accents really are. Murr began, did you just state, I want to be very clear, that the Attorney General for the state of Texas said he did not want to use his office to help law enforcement? That's exactly what was relayed to us. I don't know. I think I'm doing the wrong accent. Anyway, responded longtime former Harris County prosecutor Teresa Buis, which I guess I really did the wrong accent. I probably should have raised the register a little bit, referring to evidence that Paxton had refused to cooperate with federal agents and the Texas Department of Safety as they investigated Paul, whom Paxton claimed was being railroaded. At one point, investigators say Paxton defied Texas law and precedent by refusing to protect confidential FBI documents from disclosure. Hello. And then obtained copies himself and instructed an aide to hand-deliver them to Paul's office across from the governor's mansion. State Representative Charlie Guerin, a Republican from Fort Worth, struggled to wrap his head around 2 separate $100,000 payments that Paxton failed to disclose and later claimed were gifts. Not many people come up to me and give me $100,000, Guerin said. I bet you could fix that. It doesn't happen very often. In fact, I don't believe it's ever happened. Anyway, Houston, I think I'm moving over to like old Georgia in my accent. Anyway, Houston's State Representative Ann Johnson, a Democrat, probably summed it up best. Would it be fair to say that the OAG's office was effectively hijacked she asked. Because of Paxton's efforts to protect Paul from an investigation. That'd be my opinion, investigator Aaron Epley responded. A team of longtime state and federal prosecutors, mostly in the Houston region, meticulously explained a litany of criminal activities, ethical improprieties, and retaliatory actions that evidence shows Paxton committed. They included abuse of official capacity and misuse of public information and public funds, all somehow in service to Paul. Meanwhile, who is serving Texas taxpayers? It's time for lawmakers, regardless of partisan affiliation, to do just that, as they did in expelling Republican Brian Slayton recently for having sex with his inebriated intern. What are they doing down there in Texas? Well, having sex with inebriated interns. Glad you asked. This editorial board, long ago called for Paxton's resignation. It's clear he has no intention of doing the right thing, so lawmakers must. Paxton has disgraced and bilked and misled Texans long enough. The full Texas House should follow the lead of their wise colleagues on the investigating committee and impeach Paxton. The Senate should vote to remove him, clearing the way for a top law enforcement officer who, hopefully, has some respect for the law and for the people the office was created to serve. How do you like that? Okay. That's pretty good. I don't know. Maybe we don't really need to spend time going over the litany of actual complaints against Paxton. I mean, we did have that piece, and maybe the better way of doing it would be to look at the Texas Tribune's article that I hinted at yesterday. I don't know. I kind of want to hear some of the details about this. Let's see if we can get them. Investigators detail years of alleged misconduct by Paxton in stunning House committee hearing. Zach Despart and James Barragan are the writers for, again, the Texas Tribune, which we're all glad to see is still around. Let's say many allegations against Paxton were already known, but the airing of them revealed the scope of the investigation by the committee, which has the power to recommend censure or impeachment, and in fact, finally did do so. Let's see. Maybe we can jump down a little bit here and say, okay, their inquiry focused first on a proposed $3.3 million agreement to settle a whistleblower lawsuit filed by 4 high-ranking deputies who were fired after accusing Paxton of accepting bribes and other misconduct. Committee Chair Andrew Murr said the payout, which the legislature would have to authorize, would also prevent a trial at which evidence of Paxton's alleged misdeeds would be presented publicly. Committee members questioned, in essence, if lawmakers were being asked to participate in a cover-up. It is alarming and a very serious thing having this discussion when millions of taxpayer dollars have already been asked to remedy what is alleged to be some wrongs. That's a hell of a sentence. That's something we have to grapple with. It's challenging. So I guess, all right, what's happening here is, whistleblowers, they sued, they won a settlement of $3.3 million, and Paxton's like, okay, cool, state of Texas, pay that settlement. And because we settled, we don't go to trial on their claims about, being whistleblowers and having been retaliated against. So I don't pay the fine, and we keep the case out of court, and I get to cover this up. And I guess they weren't having it. That's nice. Many of the allegations detailed Wednesday were already known, but the public airing of them revealed the wide scope of the committee's investigation. The committee has, more mention of Brian Slayton here having been expelled. In this case, it could recommend the House censure or impeach Paxton. They went ahead and did that. A new threat to the Attorney General, who has for years survived scandals and been reelected twice despite securities fraud charges in 2015 and news of a federal investigation into the whistleblowers' claims in 2020. Aaron Epley, lead counsel for the committee, said the inquiry also delved into the whistleblowers' allegations by conducting multiple interviews with employees of Paxton's agency, many of whom expressed fears of retaliation by Paxton if their testimony were ever to be revealed, as well as the whistleblowers themselves and others with pertinent information. According to state law, Epley told the committee in a hearing at the Capitol, a government official cannot fire or retaliate against a public employee who in good faith reports a violation of the law to an appropriate law enforcement authority. That's whistleblowing. No problem. So again, now a mention that all of this is on behalf of Nate Paul, an Austin real estate investor and friend and political donor to Paxton. Each of these 4 men, the whistleblowers, is a conservative Republican civil servant, Epley said. So you could have listened to them. They're conservative Republicans. That's how you get credentialed in Texas. Interviews show that they wanted to be loyal to General Paxton. Don't do that. It's Attorney General Paxton, if anything, but don't call him General. And they tried to advise him well, often and strongly. And when that failed, each was fired after reporting wrongly labeled General Paxton to law enforcement. If he's a general, then court-martial him and shoot him. All right? Now, do you still want to be a general? No? Okay. Fine. Stop doing that. It's not general. The general describes what kind of attorney he is, not his rank. Anyway, Epley and the other investigators then walked the committee through the whistleblower's allegations, including that Paxton gave Paul help that went beyond the normal scope of his duties. I ask that you look at the pattern and the deviations from the norm, questions not just of criminal activity but ethical impropriety, and for lacking in transparency, Epley told the committee, I ask you to consider the benefits for Paxton. In an effort to help Paul with various legal troubles, investigators said they believe Paxton committed possible crimes and ignored subordinates who warned that what he was doing was illegal. Investigator Donna Cameron said these include the felony offenses of abuse of official capacity for allegedly diverting senior employees to perform work that benefited Paul, providing at least $72,000 in taxpayer-funded labor costs. Second, misuse of public information for allegedly providing Paul with an internal FBI file related to an investigation into the developer. And misapplication of fiduciary property for allegedly hiring an outside lawyer for $25,000 to work inside the Attorney General's office without the knowledge or consent of senior staff to perform work that principally benefited Paul. The public hearing to receive the investigator's verbal report was rare for a committee that typically conducts its business in private. After listening to 3 hours of testimony, committee members gathered in a nearby room shortly after 11 a.m. to discuss the information in private, emerging about an hour later to report that no action had been taken in executive session. But then they came back to it, I guess, and impeached him. So there you go. Let's see. Anything else we want to add from this? Let's see. I'll skim down a little bit here. The hearing did, here's the mention of this part of the editorial. Brought this up. The hearing capped a whirlwind 24 hours at the Capitol, during which Paxton unexpectedly called on Phelan, the speaker, to resign, alleging the Beaumont Republican recently presided over the chamber while drunk. I mean, maybe. I don't know. Hours later, the investigative committee revealed it was looking into Paxton, and Phelan dismissed the Attorney General's request that he step down as a last-ditch effort to save face. Very weird. Okay. Well, I don't know. I think we can probably jump off of the story only because there are so many other things happening here. But okay, Ken Paxton, notorious scumbag, bad guy, too much for Republicans. That really is kind of astonishing. So, all right, let's see. I guess while we're on a theme here of law enforcement gone wrong, let's see. There's at least two different directions we can go with this one. How about this one? This one is sort of outside of the political realm. I got wind of this story yesterday, not because it is a new story, but because I guess the new development is the family involved in this story is now speaking out, and there was a big LA Times story about it. And I started to read it, and not only was the story pretty like, oh my God, incredible, I can't believe this happened again, but I had to jump out of the LA Times story because they were making a very big narrative scene of it, and I was losing track of the players involved here because they were diving into all sorts of personal details about all the people involved, because it's an incredible story and it deserves that kind of treatment, but it became confusing. But the bottom line of this story is this. Well, let me tell you what the LA Times headline is that pulled me in. It reads this way: he faked an investigation. Then the, quote, detective killed her family and abducted her niece. What? Right? So I started reading, and it became a little bit confusing. I jump now to the Mercury News, which has this story from, I guess, closer in time to when the actual events in question took place. Oh, is this going to be in my way again too? More pop-up ads and firewalls. I'll have to read it from the pocket version. A Virginia police officer, and so that's of some concern to me, accused of killing a couple and their adult daughter in the family's Riverside, California, home last week. This was back in December of last year. Posed as a 17-year-old boy online and drove across the country to meet the couple's teenage granddaughter after she stopped exchanging messages with him. That's a crime, of course, as you know. Following his request for nude photos, Riverside Police Chief Larry Gonzalez said on Wednesday, November 30th, 2022. So, wow, for one thing. Headline on this story from the Mercury News, by the way, written by Brian Rokos. Cop accused in California, triple slaying, shot himself when confronted, officials say. That plays into another part of the story later on, believe it or not. So, also on Wednesday, back in November 30th, San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department announced that Austin Lee Edwards, 28, killed himself when confronted by its deputies in the Mojave Desert following the slayings. Coroner's officials said Edwards died from a gunshot. That becomes important only because apparently in finally chasing this suspect down and confronting him, there was initially the report that, the local sheriff's department officers had heroically engaged him in a gun battle. And when he fired at them, when they cornered him, they shot and killed him. And as it turns out, they did have a gun battle. It's just that nobody was able to shoot him and he shot himself. And it's just that makes it the story into a footnote on gun issues later on. But, there's even more to the incredible drama of this. But by the way, as it turns out, the probably conservative state police officers here in Virginia are the actual pedophile predators. Oops.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So, yeah, I mean, I kind of have to long story short this one too, which is incredible. But bottom line of this story, essentially, after untangling all the various players, and there's a lot of people, and the family involved is multi-generational, and so it's a little difficult to keep track of people, and some have the same surname, some don't, and then there's some very close neighbors involved, and there's a lot going on here. But I guess what it comes down to is Virginia State police officer here is involved in this, Edwards. And this 28-year-old Virginia State cop who, by the way, at the time of the killings, as they point out, was training to become a patrol deputy for the Washington County Sheriff's Office in Virginia, which I guess apparently it requires more training to be a sheriff's officer than to be a Virginia State police officer. Maybe, I don't know, maybe just because what do they mostly do, highway patrol? So it makes some sense. But he was moving from one law enforcement agency to another, and that becomes an issue in itself. Well, I mean, really, it's an issue in itself, like, should we have pedophiles, doing this stuff, being cops? And probably not, you would think. I think we can come to a consensus about that one. But it's Virginia. I'm not sure that I can get Glenn Youngkin on the right side of this one if the guy is appropriately conservative. So we'll see. But at any rate, so long story short on this 28-year-old guy, I don't know how old he was at the time, but not that much younger. So it's in 2021, so maybe he's 27, whatever. He poses online as a 17-year-old boy, somehow comes across this 15-year-old girl. They correspond, and then he starts demanding nude photos, which is kind of a problem, culturally speaking, across the board. But that much more of a problem if you are, 1, 28, and 2, a cop, and asking 15-year-old girls for nude photos. And then when they don't give them to you, this is stage 2, at which it becomes even more serious. You travel across the country to the girl's house, murder her whole family, abduct her at gunpoint, and set the house on fire, and then flee into the Mojave Desert, chased down, fortunately, by cops, because the neighbors saw, I don't know, I guess they didn't see the killings, but I guess eventually they saw the house on fire. But they did see that the granddaughter, the 15-year-old, was looked like she was being abducted. There's all sorts of details about what was going on, but they had sharp eyes, these neighbors, and they were like, we don't know this guy. He parked his car in their driveway, which attracted attention immediately. And he showed up, I think, like in a fedora and a trench coat, which, by the way, just as criminal planning goes, probably a terrible idea. I mean, I don't know what the weather was like, but it was Riverside, California. Trench coat and a fedora. I mean, I don't know. I guess it is California. You could say I'm on my way to audition for an Inspector Gadget movie or something like that. But he showed up, and then they're like, we don't know who you are. You parked in the wrong driveway, and you're taking the neighbor's granddaughter and stuffing her in the car. And the neighbors, like I said, very sharp eyes. Both the neighbors, also smart kid. The neighbor thinks that she's trying to mouth something to her, like, help me or something. And she says, I think the neighbor's granddaughter's being abducted by this guy. She calls the cops. While he's still there, they call the cops. So he's immediately being chased down. So fantastic for the neighbors. But, I mean, just in terms of being vigilant. But, wow, what a trauma for them to also not only have this horrible murder take place next door, but to be involved in this way. But thankfully they were involved because they were able to chase down the suspect. And again, as I said, they chased him into the Mojave Desert where he ran away. And then there was this, initially the report of the, heroic gun battle, but none of the cops were able to shoot the guy for some reason, probably because probably for good reason. Now that I think about it, he's in close proximity to a kidnapped 15-year-old. They probably were not firing wildly at him. But he ended the situation himself by shooting himself. But, once again, the good guys with the guns are limited in their capacity to be able to put things right simply by virtue of having guns and being good. Anyway, what a story. And I have also this story from the Virginia Mercury, not the Mercury News of California, but the Virginia Mercury, with which I'm not familiar, but maybe I ought to get familiar with it. And Bob Lewis, who has this very interesting commentary on this situation, as you might expect. He asks, a murderous pedophile got a badge and a gun in Virginia. How was that possible? It's a good question. And it's an excellent question in light of the fact, of course, that Glenn Youngkin has gotten himself elected governor here in Virginia essentially on the platform of, I'm going to be the guy who roots out this terrible, mostly inflated and hyperbolized problem of pedophile predators here in this country. And, he launched his career in Loudoun County, here where I live, there was in fact, a sexual assault and 2 sexual assaults in the high schools here by a student in the high schools, and it wasn't handled right, and that's to say the least. And all sorts of problems stemmed from it, but he was going to get to the bottom of it, and he has assigned his attorney general personally to look into this whole situation where 2 high school aged kids were involved in this assault. Three. 2 as victims and 1 as the perpetrator. The Attorney General personally is on this and has been authorized by the governor personally to look into this and to make it, the focus of his job. But in the meantime, a Virginia State police officer has driven across the country to kidnap a 15-year-old girl that he's been catfishing online, asking for nude photos. And when he got there, murdered their whole family and set the building on fire and kidnapped the girl. And for this, Glenn Youngkin would like to have the Inspector General of the Virginia State Police looking into it. We're going to have the Internal Affairs Department investigate this one. Like multiple murders and an arson and a kidnapping and a pedophile and the whole bit. The Attorney General's too busy for that one because they're looking at what 2 kids in high school did to one another and whether or not the authorities handled it properly. But we'll let the police, clean up their own mess. I just find that interesting. And so does Bob Lewis, who wrote this piece back in December for the Virginia Mercury, writing, "A Virginia man drove the width of the United States, kidnapped a 15-year-old girl, shot her mother and grandparents dead in cold blood, torched their home, and then killed himself in a shootout with California police. The gun he used, by the way, came with the badge that he wore back in Virginia. So many questions, and to date, not enough answers." And by the way, again, since all of this happened in November, December of last year, how is it that it's news now? The LA Times retelling of the story was prompted by family members of the victims speaking out, basically, I think, about how slowly the wheels are turning and how, they're not getting the kind of help in seeking justice that I suppose they thought they were entitled to. And you'd also think they probably were saying, I would have thought this would be like the top story in the United States for a very long time. We've focused on a number of other criminal stories and not involving presidents of the United States or whatever. So we're practiced at it. How come we're not getting our due? This is a horrific story and we should be getting so much national attention that there's no choice but for the public officials who aren't moving fast enough to bring the hammer down on somebody here, even though the perpetrator is dead, that we want some answers. And so does Bob Lewis here back in December. Anyway, cops are vested with extraordinary legal authority over us in enforcing society's laws, up to and including the taking of lives if their training and judgment tells them it's necessary. And we've had enormous problems with that as a result, obviously. You all know that. There's rigorous testing, maybe, personal vetting, and physical and mental training required before they wear the blue. Or there was supposed to be. Anyway, I guess hopefully that process is careful and thorough, and only the best, most fit make it through. But then there was Austin Lee Edwards. Edwards, 28, was a trooper for nearly a year and a half before he left the Virginia State Police in late October for a sheriff's deputy job in Washington County near Bristol. He wasn't on that job a month before he drove to Riverside, California, and sought out the child he had met online pretending to be someone else, a despicable practice known as catfishing. The carnage in his wake has generated sensational headlines worldwide, and we didn't notice them, I must say. When the Mercury's Graham Moomaw, M-O-O-M-A-W, by the way, if you're looking to track that down, filed a public records request with Virginia State Police for administrative documents and background checks on Edwards, the agency chose to, quote, exercise its statutory discretion and hide the documents from taxpayer view. Pressed for a reason for withholding information about Edwards, he was told that under state law, the agency isn't required to comment further. Now, you would have thought that perhaps maybe under the administration of someone like Glenn Youngkin, who had campaigned on, exposing this sort of craziness to the light of day, at least when it can help him politically, and it can help him bash one of the more progressive counties in Northern Virginia, he might, though, actually, clean up the cesspool of mess, even if it involved conservative players and Southwest Virginia. But apparently not. Apparently the Virginia State Police did not agree that they were under any obligation to help clean up the mess of actual pedophile predators. when push came to shove. So what about that? The VSP will only concede the obvious that, quote, human error is to blame for the agency missing an incident in Edwards' not too distant past during this hiring process. That's the big question everybody has. How did the guy get a badge and a gun? The agency said that no red flags emerged during his pre-employment background checks. Okay, why is that human error? The Los Angeles Times, however, revealed that the incident referenced was a 2016 mental health crisis in which Edwards threatened to kill his father and was ordered hospitalized by a court. That did not show up in the background check somehow. Human error. The human did not read it, or did not care, or was bribed not to care. I don't know which. WTVR-TV in Richmond reported last week, and again this is back in December, that Edwards revealed during a pre-employment interview that he had checked himself into a mental health facility that same year. On Thursday, Governor Glenn Youngkin asked the Office of the State Inspector General to investigate Edwards' hiring. It's a good question. It's worthy of investigation, but apparently it's not worthy of the Attorney General's time. I just kind of find that interesting. And this might ordinarily be the correct procedure for looking into it, but he's gone to such extraordinary lengths to include or to involve the Attorney General's office in the Loudoun County incidents that I thought that this might raise the same level of alarm. The cross-country drive, the use of official capacity, the use of his service weapon to murder 3-4 people. I don't know how many were actually killed. Light the place on fire and kidnap a 15-year-old child that he had been preying on over the internet. But I guess not. Stonewalling something like this is short-sighted and futile because of the likelihood that those details will be pried loose, if not by unhappy political leaders, then in the discovery process of a wrongful death lawsuit. And I guess that's probably what's going on now as well. Even if the case doesn't go to trial, such explosive material has been known to find the hands of enterprising journalists. State law doesn't require that the records of the individual in question be withheld. That was a choice. And it's a choice that only serves to undermine the trust and confidence in law enforcement that's essential for the police to effectively do their jobs, if that's possible. This columnist is not anti-police. I'll take care of that. I've known people at all levels of law enforcement, and for the most part, they're dedicated professionals who do their jobs for low pay and at high risk, all true, because they've felt a call to serve. Some of the most genuine friends I have wear or wore the badge, and I have chronicled the good work of many of them in my reporting. Edwards' case, however, underscores that, like all of society, there are bad actors in their midst. The law enforcement is an institution, has work to do when it comes to public accountability, and it's not just a passing political moment. Things came to a head in America after the broad daylight murder of George Floyd by police officers on a Minneapolis street in May of 2020, a tempestuous summer of nationwide protests over the deaths of black people at the hands of police, and arrests and incarceration rates for people of color far greater than their share of the population, drove new laws mandating greater transparency by law enforcement agencies. It led to the creation of citizen review boards and requirements that police report and sometimes publish information on police use of force incidents. According to the National Council of State Legislatures, 26 states have enacted law enforcement data collection and transparency laws since May of 2020, including 7, Arizona, Colorado, Connecticut, Minnesota, Nevada, Washington, and Wisconsin, that mandate publicly accessible databases of use of force information. Others post reports using aggregated data on use of force by officers on patrol. Virginia began collecting that data in July of 2020 under the state's Community Policing Act. Those data show that out of more than 2 million traffic stops since then, 31% of those included black people, who are only 20% of Virginia's population, compared to 63% of stops that included white people, who are 68% of the state's residents. The 2020 law also banned the police use of racial profiling in deciding which drivers to pull over. That doesn't sit well with some policymakers. As of last week, there was already one Republican bill introduced in the House to repeal the Community Policing Act. Gathering data on traffic stops, however, touches just one facet of law enforcement answerability. Departments often go mute when their own are implicated in wrongdoing, and it often takes unrelenting public pressure to get a fuller accounting. Like who shot who, even. In this instance. Last summer, Richmond Police Chief Gerald Smith called a press conference to make the fantastical claim that his department had discovered and disrupted a plot to carry out a mass shooting at Byrd Park in the city during July 4th festivities. And 2 days earlier, an assault-style rifle was used to kill 6 people and injure 30 who were watching an Independence Day parade in Highland Park, Illinois, so Smith's tale had global resonance. Challenged repeatedly by journalists to provide evidence to buttress his claims, Smith resisted. As his yarn began to unravel, like cement milkshakes and tampons in the macchiatos or whatever the hell the police were at one point complaining about, while it began to unravel, he bristled, insisting that his conclusion, based on his experience, was right and suggesting that the media were trying to impugn his officers, though they bore no role in Smith's fiction. Already on thin ice and with his story discredited, he resigned last month, November of 2020, and the record was belatedly set straight. Smith's folly is trivial alongside the murderous depravity of Edwards. Here was a walking time bomb who left red flag clues to his psychological instability, and it staggers the mind as to how they could be overlooked. He desecrated the oath he swore, right down to firing his service weapon at unarmed people and fellow officers, before he turned it on himself and committed the last of his life's many cowardly acts. So, VSP, Virginia State Police, if this harsh assessment looks bad and smells bad, too bad. If we're off base, release Edwards' records and prove us wrong. And as far as I know, that has stood for stands for where we are in the case many months later as well. Anyway, astonishing story. And if you'd like, take a look at, I'll show you the link to the LA Times story. This is a very long, detailed, and intimate retelling of the story, but then we'll also update us on where we are and why the story has re-entered the news. Okay. I just had to put that out there. Also have to catch up on this one. I mean, in terms of law enforcement or law enforcement wannabes gone wrong, we have news from the Oath Keepers front. And remember, of course, these are guys who believe that they have made the ranks of their little militia up of former law enforcement and service members, some of which might be true and some of which might be lying cosplayers. But at any rate, the big news is this. Oath Keepers leader, I think his first name is actually, isn't it Elmer? But anyway, he goes by Stewart Rhodes, has been not only convicted, but now sentenced. The New York Times has the summary here. Oath Keepers leader is sentenced to 18 years, hallelujah, in January 6th sedition case. And I just wanted to sort of point out, by the way, in terms of like, if you ever have doubts about yourself, in terms of bad life choices, the photo illustrating the piece is one of Stewart Rhodes in his Oath Keeper's hat and with his eye patch on, and now going to jail for 18 years. Don't be too down on yourself. Elmer here, he wears an eye patch. I'm sure he thinks it makes him look really tough, but remember that the actual story is that he, in his fascination with weapons, accidentally shot himself in the eye. That's why he's lost the eye. It's not like he's a pirate or lost it in a gun battle as a mercenary soldier overseas. He shot himself in the eye and lost an eye by being a gun idiot. And then he went on to to join a seditious conspiracy to overthrow the government of the United States and finds himself sentenced to 18 years in prison, which offers another opportunity to say, all right, if he actually serves this sentence and Trump or no other Republican ever regains the presidency and tries to pardon him or anything like that, I want to point out there's a substantial chance, given that 18 years in prison are in the offing here, that Donald Trump, the guy who set this insurrection on foot, and I use those words advisedly, will die before Stewart Rhodes finishes the sentence he's been handed for serving Trump's call for insurrection. So, I mean, I don't think we owe any sort of debt of fairness to Rhodes at this point, but it would be like on a cosmic level, right? Unfair, unjust for Rhodes to be rotting in prison while Donald Trump is buried with state honors as a former president of the United States, which brings us around to our fun and famous rallying cry, no state funeral for Trump. Donald Trump can never be buried with state honors, not just because it would be ridiculous to do that while there are people still in prison for carrying out his insurrection, but because he's a disgusting, horrible person and doesn't deserve a place among the legitimate presidents of the United States. But anyway, I wanted to say no state funeral for Trump and remind everybody that needs to be a rallying cry all the time, and you should be saying it all the time and using it everywhere and in social media, etc., so that people don't hit the fainting couches when he dies and people say, yeah, we should be dumping his body in the ocean, not having him lie in state in the Capitol. I know he'll want to put on a lavish private funeral, but even that shouldn't really be able to happen. And I reiterate my plans to rent a firefighter tanker plane, and everybody can pay $25 and send a bottle of your urine, and we'll dump it on his funeral site, maybe while people are still there mourning. I think that would be proper. And, not even a particularly large violation of decorum, if you ask me. Anyway, so yeah, there you go. The sentence for Stewart Rhodes, the longest so far in the federal investigation of the Capitol attack, and the first issued to a defendant convicted of sedition. So hooray, but I'm not going to read you the entirety of the article. I just wanted to sort of comment on the fact that it had happened so that I can have more time to read you other articles. What are they? I don't know. There's a whole bunch. One update on the weirdo lone Karen in Florida who got Amanda Gorman's poem banned from the schools, her local schools, based on the one-page form that she filled in which she left the reasons why she thinks that the poem should be removed from the shelves blank, and who insisted that she didn't really need any outside backup about why the thing should be removed from the curriculum because she's just really super smart. The Florida mom who sought to ban Amanda Gorman's poem, and succeeded, by the way, says she's sorry, not for that, but rather for being caught promoting the protocols of the elders of Zion. She's an anti-Semitic person as well. That's just terrific. Andrew Lapin, I don't know, Lapin, reporting this for the Jewish Telegraphic Agency, which, if you haven't heard of it, a fantastic international Jewish press agency that, largely has fallen into the role of reporting back and forth between the mostly American Jewish diaspora and events in Israel, but covering things worldwide, well known to those of us who've been interested in that scene. At any rate, here's the latest on it. Months before, a Miami area mother persuaded a local school to restrict access to an Amanda Gorman poem, she was posting anti-Semitic memes on her Facebook page. Yay. Now, Daily Salinas is apologizing for one of those things and unrepentant about the other. That's her name. I thought it was like, is this a news organization, the Daily Salinas? Her name is Daily? D-A-I-L-Y. Anyway, that's pretty incredible. I want to apologize, she says, to the Jewish community, of which there's a large one in Florida. So maybe that has something to do with it. Salinas told the Jewish Telegraphic Agency on Wednesday she was sorry for a Facebook post she shared in March offering a summary of the protocols of the Elders of Zion, a notorious anti-Semitic forgery written more than a century ago in Russia. I'm not what the post says, Salinas said. I love the Jewish community. Well, too bad. Speaking for them, I'm just going to say that. We don't like you very much. The post came to light this week after the Miami Herald identified Salinas as the Miami Lakes, Florida mother who petitioned her children's school to ban students' access to the Gorman poem. Gorman read the poem, called The Hill We Climb, at President Joe Biden's inauguration. Salinas also petitioned the school to restrict children's books about the black poet Langston Hughes and about black and Cuban history. Boy, she's really taken on all the winners in Florida. Okay. I'm anti-black, anti-Jewish, anti-Cuban. She's not got a lot of friends. After a committee reviewed her challenges, which is unbelievable. I read you the challenge. My committee review of that is, I think we should ban her from the schools. Anyway, after a committee reviewed the challenges, the Miami-Dade County School District opted to restrict all but one book about Cuba. Oh, these are other complaints. From grades K through 5, while leaving them available to middle school students. Banning discussion of Cuba in Florida. That's really pretty incredible. Salinas challenged the Gorman poem, which she says she hasn't read in its entirety, on the grounds that it contains, quote, indirect hate messages, unlike the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, of course. The review committee said it erred on the side of caution in deciding to limit students' access. Well, you know what? Here's my advice. Don't err. Okay. I mean, that's your job, right? Avoid errors. Don't err on anything. Side of caution, not the side of caution. Don't err. Or you could say, since we can't really avoid erring from time to time, maybe we shouldn't have any authority to do this at all. That's a possibility. The Miami Herald did not mention Salinas' social media activity, but after the story about her was published, a left-wing group, Miami Against Fascism, and that's not left-wing necessarily. I mean, maybe they are personally left-wing. I don't know. But being against fascism doesn't make you left-wing. It makes you smart and cool. Anyway, they called attention to a Facebook account it identified as hers. The account, which JTA reviewed, features a flood of political posts reflecting right-wing ideologies and the anti-Semitic protocols. Salinas' post about the protocols included a list of steps depicting how, quote, Jewish Zionists would achieve world domination. The graphic included stages such as place our agents and helpers everywhere, replace royal rule with socialist rule, then communism, then despotism. And that's on our list, I'm sure, despotism. And sacrifice people, including Jews sometimes, when necessary. That's all part of the plan. Reached by JTA on Wednesday, Salinas confirmed that the post about the protocols was hers and apologized for it, saying she hadn't read it beyond the word communism, which really I call into question if she's so concerned about not telling kids about Cuba. They love railing about communism. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I got to keep going because the story is so weird and ridiculous. But all right, so more about Florida's latest top Karen. I apologize to all people named Karen. We probably shouldn't be perpetuating this terrible, terrible stereotype, but I don't know. Somehow it's a great word and it really works. And then, history will record that we are in the wrong for continuing to besmirch the name. I acknowledge that. And I apologize for it, and that should be enough. And the Karen Telegraphic Agency can print that if it wants to. So there we are. Yes. So Salinas here says that I haven't read the protocols or anything about the protocols. I hadn't read it beyond the fact that the word communism was mentioned. And if she's a virulent anti-communist, you would think that she might take a different approach on the Cuba question. It's just very weird. Anyway, Salinas said her aversion to communism stems from her Cuban identity, which is what I thought might be the case when Salinas came. So that's interesting that she's banning kids from reading about Cuba until 5th grade. And I don't really know what motivates that exactly. I'm sure that she'd be okay with presenting, the anti-communist, anti-current Cuban regime information even to kids as young as kindergarten, but whatever. I don't know. She also just may be crazy and have no real basis in logic, so that's all entirely possible. She added that English is not her first language, which I guess is maybe why she wouldn't read any of the things. I see the word communism and I think It's something about communism, she said. That's not a bad conclusion, actually. I didn't read the words. Now, that's bad execution, I think, to blame for that one. And then, those said communism, so I'm just going to pass it on. But I don't know. It's a poor excuse, to be sure. Selena said that her heart became tight with pain when she thought that people would see her as an anti-Semitic for sharing the protocols post. It's hard to believe that would happen, but it can. After speaking with JTA, Selena deleted the post. Selena said she was speaking with JTA after declining to talk with other media outlets so that she could apologize. She said she is Christian. You're kidding, really? And added, we are super protective of the Jewish people. By the way, the authors of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, Christians. Not that super protective of the Jewish people, as it turns out. She added that she has Jewish friends and is a fan of the Israeli Netflix series Fauda. So there you go. Can't be anti-Semitic if you watch a television show based in Israel. She said the books about Cuba that she challenged don't tell the whole story about Cuba. Communism, the dictators, they're people that are dying and trying to come to America. What story do they tell, I wonder? I mean, I'm guessing that K through 5 in Florida, not a lot of books about the glories of the Castro revolution on the shelves, I would think, but we'll never know, and neither will she, because she didn't read them, so what's the effing difference? The significant population of Spanish-speaking immigrants from countries with a history of communism, many of whom tend to be politically conservative, has played a growing role in the region's culture wars. Salinas' Facebook feed reflects the kind of right-wing memes that continue to circulate widely, although she told JTA that she did not post everything on it herself. Oh, she's got people, does she? That's interesting. Miami Against Fascism also shared video of Salinas with the Proud Boys, all just recently convicted of seditious conspiracy. A far-right group, the JTA has to explain to its audience, with ties to anti-Semitic activists, as well as a video of her attending a school board protest last year with Moms for Liberty. You can't believe it, right? A parents' rights group, thank you very much, Glenn Youngkin, active in pushing for book removals across the country. Such groups have been instrumental in leveraging laws signed by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis that enable parents to challenge the presence of any book in school libraries. In some instances, those challenges have led to the removal of books about the Holocaust and Jewish culture. Salinas told JTA she was not a member of either group, sure, and said she had just been in attendance at protests where they were both present. A Moms for Liberty media representative also told JTA Salinas was not a member of the group and said, we denounce anti-Semitism in all its forms, except the ones we practice. Asked why she wanted the books removed in the first place, Salinas said she had just been expressing her, quote, opinion that they did not, quote, support the curriculum, but declined to elaborate. What the hell does she know about the curriculum? She doesn't read. She said she had only read parts of the books. They're ready for this one? They have to read for me because I'm not an expert, she said. I'm not a reader. I'm not a book person. I'm a mom involved in my children's education, just not reading any of it, or understanding any of it, or knowing anything about history. A representative of the school district told JTA in a statement that, quote, no literature, books or poem has been banned or removed, yes it has, and that it was detrimental at the school, it was determined. That's the word we're trying to think of. Maybe I can't read, so I shouldn't speak. It was determined at the school that Gorman's poem was, quote, better suited for middle school students. It hasn't been removed. It's just been hidden from view until you're in middle school. It's removed. In publicly available meeting minutes, the review committee said the vocabulary of Gorman's poem was determined to be of value for middle school students, and similarly that the content and subject matter of the Hughes poems were determined to be for middle school readers. The district did not respond to JTA's queries about Salinas' Facebook activity. Gorman said on Twitter that she was gutted by the removal in Salinas' children's school. Often all it takes to remove these works from our libraries and schools is a single objection, she wrote. And not only that, a single objection poorly made, and in fact, barely made. Quite honestly, she didn't fill the form out. Anyhow, just wanted to let you know what we were up against. I'm sure you could have guessed, but there were actual details that made it more informative and entertaining to share with you. Okay, let's see. Other things to share with you. For instance, here, let's just throw this quick item in here because Matthew Rigdon loves to share things with us, and we love to let him know that we read them. This was actually a good thought, relevant to nothing in particular, but because the debt crisis stuff still looms, debt ceiling crisis, I guess is what I should say. It's not a debt crisis, but the ceiling poses its own artificial crisis. And he was saying, since we're all talking about minting the coin, it's time to weaponize Trump's narcissism against the Gop. How so? Biden needs to design $1 trillion coin with Trump's face on it, call it the Trump coin, and say it's the greatest coin in American history, people are saying, and then dare Republicans to try and stop it. That's a thought. That is a thought. I mean, I don't think it, appeals to Biden very much, but it's a fun thought. I mean, it's more than just a passing joke. It probably would work. So, yeah, I wanted to acknowledge that and share that with you. Something you can carry around with you over the weekend and share around and see what people think. Okay. The idea of clicking out of Pocket was not my original intent here, but that's what I've done. I got to get back to it and see what's next for discussion here. There's an awful lot. Man. All right. Again, in passing, I will note that the Tampa Bay Times is reporting that the new College of Florida, you remember the one that DeSantis is targeting and has brought in Chris Rufo to try to tamp down on, the new college faculty has voted to censure its new trustees. That's sort of interesting. The school's revamped board has disregarded its fiduciary duties, faculty members say. Let me give you the quick rundown according to Divya Kumar's reporting on this. Faculty members at New College of Florida have taken an unusual step of censuring the school's board of trustees for disregarding their fiduciary duties. According to a letter sent to college leaders on Monday, about 80% of the faculty voted in favor of a motion listing 13 complaints against the board, which was revamped on January 6th when that was the date he chose to do it, January 6th. Revamped on January 6th when Governor Ron DeSantis appointed 6 new trustees to change the direction of the small liberal arts college. Since then, quote, we've just experienced one thing after another that illustrates that the board members are not fulfilling their fiduciary duties, said Liz Leninger, I'm guessing is the pronunciation, a faculty member who raised the motion on behalf of a colleague. The Sarasota school said in a statement that many of the complaints were false. The school speaking now. It said resistance to change is a common reaction to transitions, and it predicted the concerns would subside once the faculty see how all of the changes we're making at New College are moving us in a direction of improvement and future stability for our campus. Leninger said the faculty leaders chose a censure instead of a vote of no confidence because they're hoping the board will correct specific behaviors. The motion states in part that trustee Matthew Spalding, Matthew Spalding, a dean at Hillsdale College in Michigan. Why is he a trustee of this place? Because they're trying to turn it into the Hillsdale of the South. They've said so explicitly. Well, it says Spalding communicated with former Education Commissioner Richard Corcoran outside of public meetings to pave the way for Corcoran becoming New College's interim president in February. It states that Christopher Rufo, also a trustee, an activist who has designed several conservative education policies, quote, refuses to cooperate with public records requests related to his work at the school. It also says Rufo, trustee Mark Bauerlein, and Eddie Spear, I'm guessing at pronunciations, have not, to their knowledge, disclosed financial conflicts of interest related to school partnerships, other governing boards, or income from subscriptions to their writing or test products. Spear was initially appointed to the board by DeSantis, but recently failed to win approval from the Florida Senate. That's an interesting development I didn't know about. The censure motion further states that when a board majority voted to deny 5 faculty members tenure, they did so without explanation or evidence of having read the tenure files or understanding tenure processes at the college, as is their duty. It also says Rufo and Spear regularly make disparaging and unprofessional comments about New College faculty, students, and staff on social media, and their writings diminish the college's standings. Leninger said some faculty spoke against the motion during the debate, saying they feared the trustees would retaliate. That's why they opposed it. Interesting. New College Faculty Union President Steve Shipman said in a statement that the group was prepared to defend its members if that happened. Such an action would be an unfair labor practice, he said. Regardless of what happens, the union will defend our members' right to work as to preserve the best features of New College: academic freedom, student-directed learning, and the collaborative pursuit of knowledge by both students and faculty. On Twitter last week, Leninger and Alan Levine, a member of the Florida Board of Governors, debated what happens if a trustee does not act in the best interests of the university. Levine said the board could not remove a trustee unless it was part of an ethics investigation, but Leninger said New College's bylaws state that a governor can remove a trustee if the Board of Governors recommends it. In an interview, Levine said he encouraged faculty to report any behaviors they felt were violations of ethics to the Ethics Commission, but that nothing he had seen so far rose to that level. So they go back and forth a little bit on this one. Just wanted to let you know that that was happening, and we'll see how that pans out, and might be worth keeping an eye on and see where they get to with this. All right. Let's see. A few other things I want to share, and then I got two Rosalind McGregor entries in the wings here, which, when she sent them, she said weren't time sensitive, but we've been sitting on them for so long. I really thought I would like to get those out on the record, even though there's so many amazing things to catch up on. Let me catch up on this one from the Washington Post. This deserves mention too. Devlin Barrett, Josh Dawsey, Spencer Sue, and Perry Stein reporting yesterday, Trump workers removed Mar-a-Lago boxes a day before the FBI came for those documents. You must have heard this by now. We haven't had a chance to discuss it, though. New details, including alleged dress rehearsal for moving sensitive papers, show a focus on Donald Trump's instructions and intent. And really, at this point, they have all they need to arrest the guy. Just make it happen already. Two of Donald Trump's employees moved boxes of papers the day before an early June visit by FBI agents and a prosecutor to the former president's Florida home to retrieve classified documents in response to a subpoena. Timing that investigators have come to view as suspicious, you think? And an indication of possible obstruction. Of course it is. According to people familiar with the matter, Trump and his aides also allegedly carried out a dress rehearsal for moving sensitive papers even before his office received that subpoena in May. According to people familiar with the matter who spoke on condition of anonymity because they're probably also involved in criminal activity and want to get out of it. Prosecutors, in addition, have gathered evidence indicating that Trump at times kept classified documents in his office in a place where they were visible and sometimes showed them to others, these people said. Taken together, the new details of the classified documents investigation suggest a greater breadth and specificity to the instances of possible obstruction found by the FBI and Justice Department than had been previously reported. It also broadens the timeline of possible obstruction episodes that investigators are examining, a period stretching from events at Mar-a-Lago before the subpoena to the period after the FBI search there on August 8th. That timeline may prove critical as prosecutors seek to determine Trump's intent in keeping hundreds of classified documents. You really don't need it. After he left the White House, a key factor in deciding whether to file charges, possibly for obstruction, mishandling national security secrets, or both. The Washington Post has previously reported that the boxes were moved out of the storage area after Trump's office received a subpoena, but the precise timing of that activity is a significant element in the investigation. Grand jury activity in the case has slowed in recent weeks, and Trump's attorneys have taken steps, including outlining his potential defense to members of Congress and seeking a meeting with the Attorney General, that suggest they believe a charging decision is getting closer. The grand jury working on the investigation apparently has not met since May 5th, after months of frenetic activity in the federal courthouse in Washington. That is the panel's longest hiatus since December, shortly after Attorney General Merrick Garland appointed Jack Smith as special counsel to lead the probe and coinciding with year-end holidays. Smith was also investigating Trump's efforts to block the results of the 2020 election, of course, and the former president, who is again a candidate for the White House, has been indicted in New York on charges of falsifying business records and is under investigation for election-related matters in Fulton County, Georgia. Trump has denied wrongdoing in each case. This is nothing more than a targeted, politically motivated witch hunt against President Trump that's concocted, says Stephen Chung, a Trump spokesman, in a written statement, hoax, yada, yada, yada. Chung accused prosecutors of showing no regard for common decency or key rules that govern the legal system. Sure. And I really have to yada, yada everything they say at this point. In the course of the negotiations over the return of the documents, President Trump told the lead DOJ official, anything you need from us, just let us know. That DOJ, this is still Chung here. Okay. So they figure they're innocent because they claim that Trump said, whatever you need, just let us know, and then we'll hide it. And that actually doesn't inure to their credit. But anyway, of particular importance to investigators in the classified documents case, according to people familiar with the probe, is evidence showing that boxes of documents were moved into a storage area on June 2nd, just before senior Justice Department lawyer Jay Bratt arrived at Mar-a-Lago with agents. The June 3rd visit by law enforcement officials was to collect material in response to the May grand jury subpoena, demanding the return of all documents with classified markings. This, by the way, comes a day or two after the report that what surfaced from the lawyer's notes that prosecutors now have in their hands is that basically, yes, Trump's lawyers told Trump, you can't keep these things, you have to give them back. And he said, isn't there some way we can get around it and either make it legal or push back, or how long can I delay? And then then he spoke to other groups saying, let's hide the stuff on top of all of that. Boy. Okay. John Irving, a lawyer representing one of the two employees who moved the boxes, said the worker did not know what was in them and was only trying to help Trump valet Walt Nauta, who was using a dolly or hand truck to move a number of boxes. He was seen on Mar-a-Lago security video helping Walt Nauta move boxes into a storage area on June 2nd, 2022. My client saw Mr. Nauta moving boxes and volunteered to help him. The next day, the employee helped Nauta pack an SUV when former President Trump left for Bedminster for the summer. The lawyer said his client, a longtime Mar-a-Lago employee who he declined to identify, has cooperated with the government and did not have any reason to think that helping move the boxes was at all significant. You get that idea? All right. Irving represents several witnesses in the investigation, and his law firm is being paid by Trump's Save America PAC. Disclosure reports show. A lawyer for Nauta, Stanley Brand, declined to comment. It's not the Stanley Brand from the budget stuff, is it? I don't think so. All right. Anyway, investigators have sought to gather any evidence indicating Trump or people close to him deliberately withheld any classified papers from the government. Why do I know the name Stanley Brand, though? What am I thinking of? Who am I thinking of? This is I think there is a prominent Stanley Brand attorney who I know from like federal, policy matters, but I can't think of who I can't remember anything about. Oh, here he is listed at the Federalist Society of all places. So maybe he is. He's currently listed here as senior counsel at Aiken Gump. But yeah, Brand, he testifies in front of Congress all the time, but I didn't realize he was doing it on behalf of the Federalist Society. Maybe it is Stanley Brand doing this defense work down in this case, since it does involve Trump and his co-conspirators here. Anyway, I'm going to stop here. It's another lengthy article. But it's just an amazing development that they were plotting to move those things ahead of time, knowing that a visit from law enforcement was coming. I'll read you this part here. In a court filing in August explaining the search, prosecutors wrote that they had developed evidence that obstructive conduct took place in connection with the response to the subpoena, including that documents were likely concealed and removed from the storage room. In other words, by the way, all of this would, for anybody else, have been the basis of the issuance of a no-knock warrant for seizure of this thing, because the exigent circumstances were such that they should have had every reason to believe that he would act to obstruct their search and continue to hide the documents if he was given any advance notice of their arrival at the scene. And I don't know. For some reason, nobody brought that up. And who knows what we may have. They may not have gotten all the documents that they were after. What if he failed to successfully conceal most of them, but we don't know whether he was successful in concealing some yet, do we? Prosecutors have also gathered evidence that even before Trump's office received that subpoena in May, he had what some officials have dubbed a dress rehearsal for moving government documents that he did not want to relinquish, people familiar with the investigation said. That's hugely indicative of obstructive intent. The term dress rehearsal was used in a sealed judicial opinion issued earlier this year in one of several legal battles over the government's access to particular witnesses and evidence, some of the people said. It was used to describe an episode when Trump allegedly reviewed the contents of some, but not all, of the boxes containing classified material. The New York Times first reported that Trump's team conducted what was, quote, apparently a dress rehearsal before the subpoena arrived. At the time, Trump and his legal team were engaged in back and forth with the National Archives and Records Administration over whether he had taken from the White House records and property that were supposed to stay with the government. He did. And he was planning to hide it when they came to get it back. So that's the upshot of the story. I know you know it, but we got to get it on the record in case, some listeners don't. And good. Now we have it there, and all's well. Let's see. Why don't we take a moment? There are two, as I mentioned, two segments from Rosalind McGregor, one of which I believe is actually brief enough for us to sneak in before the break, so why not get running with it? It has to do with Trump in some respect. Roll it. What do you got for us, Rosalind?
Good morning, David. For today's correspondence from Michigan, I'd like to direct your attention to the lawyers who claim that Trump would have won in Michigan except for election fraud, etc. The Associated Press reports that 9 lawyers who were found to abuse the court system by filing a lawsuit that challenged Michigan's 2020 election results in favor of President Joe Biden committed misconduct and should be disciplined, a watchdog agency said. Michigan's Attorney Grievance Commission filed a complaint recently against Sidney Powell, Linwood, and 7 other lawyers who were allied with then-President Donald Trump. The complaint now goes to the Michigan Attorney Discipline Board for further consideration. In 2020, Sidney Powell and friends supported a lawsuit on behalf of Republican voters that was filed just a few days after Biden's 154,000 vote victory in Michigan was certified. The lawsuit sought to decertify those results and have voting machines impounded. U.S. District Judge Linda Parker said the request was, quote, stunning in its scope and breathtaking in its reach, unquote. The Attorney Grievance Commission said in its complaint that the Powell and Friends lawsuit was, quote, frivolous and exposed the law profession to, quote, contempt, unquote. 3 of the 9 lawyers are licensed in Michigan, while Powell, Lynn, and others are licensed in other states or the District of Columbia. It's unclear what sanctions could be ordered against lawyers who practice outside Michigan. Wood's name was on the 2020 lawsuit, but he has insisted that the only role he played was telling Powell he was available if she needed a seasoned litigator. Powell defended the lawsuit and says lawyers sometimes have to raise what she called, quote, unpopular issues, unquote. After dismissing the case, U.S. District Judge Parker ordered the 9 lawyers to attend 12 hours of legal education, including 6 hours in election law. She also ordered $175,000 in legal fees to be paid, mostly to the city of Detroit. Those sanctions are being appealed. So that's some more good news that at least 3 of Sidney Powell's friends are facing professional sanctions for their obviously crackpot lawsuit about the 2020 Michigan election. That's my time. I'm Rosalind McGregor, your Michigan correspondent, signing off. Back to you, David.
All right. Well, thanks, Rosalind. We've got one in under the wire before the break, and maybe we'll see if we can get around to the other in our next segment. And I'm looking for something that we might be able to sneak in here before we get to that music. I got this one here from Rolling Stone. Just again, something I want to put on the record just so you know that it exists. Republican, Georgia Gop chair. Is she the chair of the no, not the entire party, but a district chair, goes full flat earth and says globes are part of a conspiracy. And it comes from Rolling Stone. And if I have the author correct here, Nikki McCann Ramirez, but I'm reading off of, reading off of the pocket version of this. But you'll recognize perhaps the name of who we're talking about. Candace Taylor, Kandiss, Candace Taylor, a recently elected Gop district chair in Georgia, it says, would like to know why Big Globe won't stop shoving round earth propaganda down our throats. Do you remember Candace Taylor? She was the one running not long ago, I think, for governor of Georgia. Is that right? Or was she running for the Senate? Yeah, maybe she was in the Senate race against Herschel Walker, but lost in the primary. I don't know. You may remember her, though, for driving around the state in a bus with her name and the slogan, Jesus, Guns, and Babies, emblazoned on the side. Yeah, I think we remember her. I've missed my outro for the music by far now, so I'm going to play some of our cool, funky music that we do and then cut out at a weird place in here. But apparently she's still at it, and she does a podcast known as Jesus, Guns, and Babies, which is actually kind of funny sounding. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time, just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. Alright, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio as I fade our music back because I got such a late start with the music, but I think I've put us back on track time-wise, so that's good. So hey, how about the Flat Earthers' presence in, public discourse at all, which is pretty amazing. So Candace Taylor is still in a position of influence in America, which is crazy. In an interview with David Weiss, a.k.a. apparently Flat Earth Dave, and Matt Long, whoever that may be, on her Jesus, Guns, and Babies podcast, Taylor and her guests discussed biblical, quote, evidence that the earth is actually flat as a pancake. The people that defend the globe don't know anything about the globe, said Weiss. If they knew a tenth of what Matt and I know about the globe, they would be flat earthers. Yeah, because that's the real problem is people who believe the earth is round don't know as much as you who understand that it's flat. But here, so listen to Candace go crazy here. All the globes everywhere, Taylor said later in a discussion. I turn on the TV, there's globes in the background. Everywhere there's globes. You see them all the time. It's constant. My children will be like, Mama, globe, globe, globe. They're everywhere. That's what they do. They brainwash, she added. For me, if it's not a conspiracy, whatever that's supposed to mean, if it is real, oh, I see. If the globes aren't actually a conspiracy, if the globes are real, well, why are you pushing so hard everywhere I go? Every store, you buy a globe. There's globes everywhere. Every movie, every TV show, news media. Why? More and more, I'm like, it doesn't make sense. Republicans made this person gave her a position of authority. Now, Taylor ran for governor. That's right. Okay. In 2022 and recently became a Georgia Gop district chair. She's a flat earther. It says here in Right Wing Watch that they're quoting from in the Rolling Stone piece. She's a flat earther. Everywhere there's globes, and that's what they do to brainwash their, I guess this is probably the call out. I would have seen that in the actual formatting of the Rolling Stone article. Now, outside of promoting crackpot conspiracies about the Earth's shape, Taylor is a firm believer that the 2020 election was fraudulently stolen from Donald Trump. Taylor implemented the Trumpian playbook after her own failed 2022 bid for Georgia's governorship, despite only winning 3.7% of the vote in the Republican primary. Compared to Governor Brian Kemp's 73.7%, Taylor refused to concede her election loss, claiming the race had been rigged. No such claims were made after her successful run for Gop chair of Georgia's 1st District in April, however. So just wanted to update you on that. And just to remind you that the debt ceiling negotiations are being negotiated being handled by people quite like this, who believe that ivermectin was the cure for COVID, or that the earth is flat, or that the election was stolen, or that, or worse, that default really isn't all that bad, and that they understand the truth about economics much better than you liberal idiots do who believe in globes. And by the way, I loved the conclusion that she reached. If a round earth theory isn't a conspiracy, then why are they always shoving it down our throats is incredible. It's like, well, what's the conspiracy? To tell what they think the truth is? I mean, does that mean that flat earthers are a conspiracy as well? I mean, they are, but I mean, the fact that they won't shut up about it isn't a conspiracy by itself. It's just you believe this thing. Now, the thing you believe might be a conspiracy theory type, whatever. Is probably the best description for it. But the idea that other people believe in the globe and therefore describe the earth as a globe isn't a conspiracy. They really do believe that. There's evidence for it, and that's great. But I don't know. I just find the whole thing that if I'm wrong, then why do they keep saying I'm wrong? That's an incredible conspiracy theory all by itself. Anyway, don't name your kids Candice, Kandiss. It makes them dumb. And I apologize to anybody who's got that name and who's a genius. But if you are that person, speak up. I'll apologize to you. But my guess is, I don't know. I just feel like it's not going to happen. Based on nothing. That's a conspiracy theory of my own. I'll say this. Maybe a better description would be, if you're driving around Georgia or anywhere in a giant Jesus Guns Babies bus, I don't think it's going to work out for me and you about my respecting your intelligence, whether your name is Candace or anything else. I just don't think it's going to work. Now, the fact that she's also named Candace, I think, with a K, it just adds to the mystique. But I should be blaming it on the bus and not the name. Okay. Glad we have that cleared up. All right. Speaking of the debt ceiling crisis, let's see. Where did it go? Did I not keep it open? Maybe I have too many pages open. And I mentioned to you that the front page of Daily Kos today was brimming with excellent stories. And one which I felt I should mention, is it still on? Yeah, there are a couple of things. But one was Jones' mention of the fact that the Republicans in the House are voting to go ahead with their recess for Memorial Day, despite the fact that they haven't settled the issue and come to a conclusion yet. And that's remarkable all by itself. But she was also mentioning, she wrote up a piece here, that Democrats were on fire in the House on Thursday. Not literally on fire. That would have been a bad thing, but rhetorically on fire. And I did notice that there was another similar story that I had put away, and I wondered whether it was about much the same thing here. But the way Joan puts, the nation could be thrown into default on June 1st if Congress doesn't act to raise the debt ceiling, or if President Joe Biden fails to act unilaterally. Despite the tight deadline, despite there being no indication that anybody has put pen to paper to write the legislation that gets us out of this mess, and despite the fact that the most vulnerable people are panicking about how they'll survive the coming month, Speaker Kevin McCarthy has let Republicans leave Washington on Thursday. They're officially off until June 5th for Memorial Day, which the rest of the nation will celebrate in just one day on May 29th. But they've taken the week. They were told to be ready to come back on a day's notice, so there is that. Dozens of Democrats stuck around after their colleagues split, 88 of them, in fact, possibly a House record. They used the 1-minute portion of the House floor time to remind their colleagues of their obligation to the American people, including the veterans they're supposedly honoring with this long recess, and to the Constitution. Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries got a standing O for his remarks, saying, "We never threatened to default on our debt. They worked with the Trump administration to avoid default 3 times, notwithstanding the fact that in our country's 247-year history, 25% of the nation's debt was racked up under 4 years of the Trump administration." But yet, here we are a few days from America being unable to pay its bills because you made a political calculation that you will be successful in 2024 if you crash the economy. That's wrong. That's cruel. That's un-American. Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi focused on what Republicans are doing to veterans on this holiday and was on fire in her own right. There are a couple other names called out here. Jamie Raskin joining in the parade as well. Joyce Beatty of Ohio, chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, on hand as well. Representative Sean Casten of Illinois, short and to the point. McCarthy is a hypocrite. I come to praise the July 2019 version of Speaker McCarthy. Where are those brave, principled souls now? Madam Speaker, as you know, the answer is they're not here. And AOC on the floor as well, blasting Republicans who decided to skip town after running up a bill that they're now refusing to pay. And not only that, but they're accusing Democrats, saying we spend too much. For anyone who wants to entertain that thought, I ask you to think about the last time a person has said in this country that the government does too much for them, that their Social Security check was too high, that teachers are paid too much. Interesting point as well. That goes in tandem with something I put away here. I wonder how long is the clip? Greg shared with me the other day this tweet from Asen, who captures a lot of the fun video from public events, saying, let's see, where did I put this one? That apparently during, I don't know what they were debating, but during proceedings on the House floor, Murdery Trader Green was on the floor, and I guess had some complaints about the way people were conducting themselves. Let me see if I can bring up the audio on this and play it, because apparently she admonished her fellow members to follow rules of decorum, and they apparently laughed in her face. Let's see whether we can hear that on audio. It's 44 seconds of this clip here. Oh, you can barely hear it. Oh, that's funny too. I guess it must be, she's in the chair. That's horrible. No wonder we're hearing this. So you hear this little whispering of reminder to the members are reminded to abide by the rules of decorum of that. And then she begins to say exactly the same thing. That's the way things work. The parliamentarian's office is whispering in the ear of people who are in the chair who don't have any idea of what's going on, like Murdery Trader Green. And this happens with almost everybody, but it's just kind of funny to hear. So listen carefully. I think I've got the audio up all the way here, and you can hear the instructions being whispered or spoken to her, but off mic.
The members are reminded to abide by decorum of the House.
And there she is banging the gavel. Okay, just wanted to sort of point that out and play that. It's just probably just more laughter. I don't know whether there's any hooting and hollering at it, but the idea of Marjorie Trader Green, Trader Green, yeah, I got that right, lecturing anybody about decorum and house. I mean, she's admonished to. How many times has she had her words taken down or had it been threatened and been banned from committees? And just hearing that come out of her mouth must have been a real scream. Anyway, just wanted to put that out there. Let's see, before we run out of time on us again, I know doubling up on, this was not Rosalind's intent, having us double up on her presentations, but I do want to get caught up. And she had another piece that I thought was equally fascinating. And let's roll. This one runs about 6 minutes, and we can pick it up after that.
Good morning, David. This installment is a look at the results of the recent May 2nd election in Michigan. You may remember that Michigan's state election law allows local elections at the beginning of May, August, and November. With historically low turnout, most school systems choose the May election for proposing their millage renewals or new requests for funding. MLive reviewed the election results across the state and concluded, quote, when it comes to supporting causes backed by the far right, it doesn't appear the average Michigander is biting. From Algoma Township, voters deciding their library should remain within the Kent District Library System, to Hillsdale County residents ousting a township clerk who cast doubt on the legitimacy of the 2020 elections, a number of causes supported by grassroots conservative efforts were shot down during the May 2nd elections. But ask Dave Dulio, director of the Center for Civic Engagement at Oakland University, whether it's an indication these causes are losing steam with the average voter, and he'll tell you that remains to be seen. Quote, trying to extrapolate much of anything from a May election in Michigan is really, really difficult, simply because the salience of the May election day is low. When you've got a small number of votes cast in total, the winning side doesn't need to do much work, Dulio said. Motivation is the key in non-November elections, he added, meaning the name of the game is more about who can turn out their people. Officials and voters in these local elections said while the issues were complex, residents appeared to push back on misinformation and rejected the political polarization that came with it. In January, the Algoma Township Board of Trustees approved asking voters during the May election if they wanted to leave the Kent District Library System as a way to save taxpayers' money. Some, however, saw it as a means to better control the library and the materials it offered. That was especially true after a Kent County parent group sent out a flyer urging residents to leave the system while falsely accused the district library of hosting, quote, a drag queen reading hour in the name of diversity. Voters ultimately rejected leaving the Kent District Library by a huge margin, 77% in support of staying to 22% to leave. Algoma Township resident Peggy Barbour said while culture war issues might have played into the vote to leave, the vote to stay within the district library system mostly came from a place of passion. Barbour was a part of a group which did phone banking and door-to-door canvassing in an effort to support the library. I know there were lots of people who are GOP supporters did see the light and did see the reason that we were promoting the truth and the facts, Barbour said, and they saw the misinformation and the lies that the opposition was propagating. It wasn't resonating with them. That didn't work. She also said once voters were able to see past the opposition's flyers and all of that misleading stuff, they became receptive to keeping within the district library system. Following this same trend, voters chose overwhelmingly 76% in favor to renew an operating millage for Heartland Consolidated Schools. There, Republican leaders in deeply conservative Livingston County stoked opposition to a renewal of a tax on non-homestead properties in Heartland Community Schools, which serves some 5,200 students north of Brighton. Much of that pushback stemmed from concerns of how the school handled the topics of gender, race, sexuality, as well as student discipline and safety. Quote, it is overall a nonpartisan issue, but the problems for us and why we oppose it is more about the superintendent and the district itself, said Livingston County GOP Chair Jennifer Smith, who also leads the county chapter of Moms for Liberty. Corey Charbonneau, a Heartland school parent, said rejecting the millage would have cut the district's budget by 10%. Quote, "We were disgusted by it. Kids aren't pawns. They shouldn't be politicized," said Charbonneau, who is a teacher and serves as the vice president of Livingston Integrity PAC, a nonpartisan group formed this year to respond to the divisiveness. Over in Adams Township in deep red Hillsdale County, voters ousted clerk Stephanie Scott by a nearly 2-to-1 margin, choosing her challenger instead. Scott had cast doubt on the accuracy of the 2020 election results, spread conspiracy theories, and attracted scrutiny from the state police. Scott was earlier stripped of her election duties after state officials alleged she resisted required integrity checks on the vote tabulator machines and explored options to hand count ballots. Scott's ally, Township Supervisor Mark Nichols, also lost in a recall election to his challenger. Though both challengers identify as Republicans, they were forced to run as independents due to Scott and Nichols already occupying the conservative spot on the ballot. After the November 2020 election, Scott continued spreading QAnon conspiracy theories on her social media while pushing disproven claims of election fraud. That all came to a head when the Michigan State Police seized voting equipment from the clerk ahead of a November 2021 election. For some people, like Gail McClanahan, enough was enough. She organized a petition campaign to force a recall election for Scott and Nichols. The newly elected clerk's platform is, quote, "MABA, make Adams Township boring again," said Gail McClanahan, a 75-year-old retiree who said she has worked township elections since 1972. "That's what she said. That's her goal. We don't like this. We're just a nice little township," McClanahan said. The idea of simplicity, Dulio added, can be more of a driving factor for voters than people realize. In the instance of Adams Township, but also Algama's library debacle, he noted that most people who interact with government and its services have a desire to, quote, have just government beat government. Maybe that is what it takes to beat these back, Dulio said. That's my time. I'm Rosalind McGregor signing off. Back to you, David.
Thanks again, Rosalind. And yeah, great point. I wanted to sneak that in also because it's, it's good news. Electorally from Michigan, and just reminding us, not dissimilar from Virginia, where sometimes you get bad news and it gives you the impression that either the whole state or certain sections of it have been given over to weirdo Republican reactionaries, when in fact they're still in the minority, and people will occasionally rise up and say to hell with that and get rid of them. And even in some of the red spots in Michigan, this is happening. So I was pleased to be able to share that news with you. Okay. Again, 10,000 different things to get to before the weekend, but this one actually is a little bit more time sensitive. I didn't think so until I was driving around here and I began to see the signs that were actually advertising the event in question going on. It is Philip Bump writing at the Washington Post asking, "Why aren't we talking more about Trump's business with the Saudis?" Now, why were there signs all over the place here in Loudoun County of Trump's business with the Saudis? Well, you'll see what kind of business it is if we read on. The Republican-led House Oversight Committee has spent most of the past 5 months hard at work trying to link, quote, the Biden family, read relatives of President Biden, but not Biden himself, to millions of dollars proffered by foreign business interests before Biden became president. With the 2024 presidential campaign already at the top of the political conversation, the idea that some revelation might prove to be politically damaging to the incumbent is obviously a central motivation. It is, therefore, safe to assume that the committee's interest would be piqued if it learned that the Democratic frontrunner for his party's nomination was actively receiving unspecified amounts of money from a foreign business, one linked closely to a foreign leader. A foreign leader, mind you, who was implicated by U.S. intelligence in the murder of a journalist who wrote for a U.S. newspaper. The Oversight Committee would no doubt launch hearings if it heard that the Democratic frontrunner was actively promoting that foreign business, much less a shared business venture between the candidate and the foreign entity. But all of that is true of Donald Trump, not Joe Biden, so no hearing should be expected. This weekend, and that's why we're reading it, the golf course that Trump owns in Virginia, hence the signs, his regular destination for rounds of golf when he was president, is hosting a tournament organized by LIV Golf. LIV Golf, essentially a series of tournaments involving a well-paid coterie of golfers, is primarily funded by Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund, chaired by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. By the way, everybody's got initials here. The Public Investment Fund, identified as PIF. We all know Mohammed bin Salman, of course, is MBS, Mr. Bonesaw. Mohammed, you will recall, was identified by U.S. intelligence officials as having approved the killing of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi. The extent to which LIV is primarily an offshoot of the Saudi government is subject to some debate. In February, a federal judge considering an antitrust lawsuit filed by LIV against the PGA suggested that LIV was dependent on the PIF, again, the Public Investment Fund in Saudi Arabia. It is plain that PIF is not a mere investor in LIV, U.S. District Judge Susan Van Keulen wrote. It is the moving force behind the founding, funding, oversight, and operation of LIV. What's more, as the New York Times has reported, LIV probably isn't a particularly good investment, something the PIF would ostensibly seek in its efforts. What the LIV very much is, however, is popular with Donald Trump. The organization began hosting events last year. The third was hosted at Trump's club in New Jersey, where he participated in a Pro-Am round to help promote it. He did so despite outcry from the families of people killed in the terrorist attacks of September 11th. I don't know much about the 9/11 families, Trump told the Wall Street Journal, because, of course, he was only president of the United States once. Last year's LIV season culminated in an event hosted at Trump's course in Miami. This season, Trump Properties will host 3 LIV events. In other words, 5 of LIV's 22 events in 2022 and 23 will be held at venues in the former president's business portfolio. How much is that worth to his company and to himself? Who knows? It's important to recognize, though, that cash is the central value proposition LIV offers, poaching PGA players primarily through massive contracts and big purses. Trump had his own reasons to be frustrated with golf's powers that be. They were disapproving of his efforts to, overturn the 2020 presidential election. But it's hard to imagine that LIV isn't paying millions of dollars to use Trump's facilities, as is generally how such deals go down, plus income from souvenirs and other spending. The former president and, of course, Republican 2024 frontrunner also keeps giving LIV additional advertising. On Truth Social, he has disparaged the PGA and encouraged his millions of followers to tune in to LIV coverage. This has been a particular weak spot for the organization. More recently, he has plugged the upcoming tournament in Virginia, offering his followers the chance to buy tickets. And here is his Truth Social, whatever the hell they call it, embedded in the story. LIV is not the only connection between Saudi Arabia and what we might call the Trump family, including son-in-law Jared Kushner. The PIF invested $2 billion in a fund run by Kushner soon after Trump left the White House. The LIV relationship, though, is reportedly the focus of a subpoena from Special Counsel Jack Smith. Yes, he's already on it. One of Trump's central political assets is that he rapidly develops immunity to specific criticisms. He will spark outcry, but wave it away, leaving his critics to continue to draw attention to his behavior for a public already aware of it. So the idea that Trump has a vague, probably lucrative relationship with a foreign leader, even as he seeks a second term as president, just blends into the background noise. If only there was an institution within the federal government interested in publicly policing sketchy relationships between presidential candidates and foreign entities. Alas, there doesn't appear to be. Well, it's a good question why we're not paying more attention to it. But yeah, I mean, he has the answer. Just Trump finds immunity in adding all of his scandals to an enormous pile of scandals. And somehow that works for him. All right. Well, time for us to wrap up here and sign off for the weekend. but let's see. Just want to, I guess to tease something for you to read over the weekend. This one I'll never get through. I think it's too long and too detailed. But an interesting point being made by a combination of a number of writers writing at Just Security, where all of the complicated stuff goes these days. Paula Junghans, I guess, Norman Eisen, Sivan Watt, Joshua Stanton, and Fred Wertheimer. Wasn't he from Common Cause years ago? And he now has a new organization. It's been years since he organized this new group. But at any rate, they get together on this piece at Just Security called The Untold Strength of Tax Crimes in Manhattan DA's Case Against Former President Trump. Part of a number of, a series of articles on the various cases against Trump. But this one sort of illustrating, I guess, as I said, the untold strength of a big element of the Manhattan DA's case, Alvin Bragg, of course, and you might find it interesting reading. One of the things Pocket does when you put these things away is estimates the amount of time it would take to read it. This one coming in about 35 minutes, and we usually go long. You know how it operates on this show. But maybe something you want to take a look at over the weekend, but perhaps we can digest it or even read it in its entirety sometime next week. And just to give you an indication of, where Bragg's cases stand in the spectrum of charges and their relative strength when they're eventually brought against Donald Trump. Okay. As I said, time for us to sign off. That means it's time for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam next right here on Netroots Radio. And this gives us a little more time than usual, because it's the beginning of the music, to read over what's going on and what you can expect. And let's do it this way. We'll read it verbatim. Starting off in the Bistro Cafe, the Texas judge from the abortion pill case, because Merrick, right, will now hear a $1.8 billion lawsuit against Planned Parenthood. Well, I guess we can figure out how that one's going to go. Then on the rest of the menu, even though she broke the law, Indiana's Medical Licensing Board decided late Thursday night to discipline... even though she broke no law. That's the correct reading. They have decided to discipline the Indiana doctor who performed an abortion for a 10-year-old girl raped in Ohio, who had to flee to Indiana to try and get the help that she needed. Broke no law, but will be under investigation. The Supreme Court just went ahead and rewrote the Clean Water Act yesterday. Tune in to Justice's show for more details on that. I should have shoehorned that into today's coverage, but thankfully he's here to back us up. And there's much more yet to come.
From netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Here's some good news. California unlikely to run out of electricity this summer because of a big increase in power storage and a wet winter that filled the state's reservoirs. And then internationally, a Pakistani journalist and supporter of former Prime Minister Imran Khan has gone missing, the second one in 2 weeks, and companies finding it not so simple to leave Russia. Next.